Have you ever just sat there and thought, like, what is the point of this whole Earth thing?
It's a question that a lot of people ask themselves at some point in their lives.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, what are we even doing here? Like, is this a cosmic classroom, or are we all just stuck in some kind of cosmic prison?
Well, lucky for us, we have some fascinating material to help us explore that question in this deep dive. We're going to be looking at it through the lens of the Law of One.
Okay, so for those who might not be as familiar with the Law of One, can you give us a little bit of a refresher?
Sure, so the Law of One is a perspective on the spiritual evolution of consciousness,
Mm.
and it talks about our current stage of development as being in third density.
Right, third density. So what exactly does that mean?
In third density, we become self-aware and gain the ability to make moral choices, which are pretty huge milestones in our spiritual journey.
So that's what sets third density apart from the other densities, the power of choice.
Exactly, and that's why the Law of One puts so much emphasis on the concept of choice. It's at the core of our purpose in this density.
Okay, so choice is a big one. What are some of the other key ideas that we'll be looking at today?
Well, there's this concept of catalyst, which refers to all the experiences we have in life, both positive and negative, and how they serve as opportunities for learning and growth.
Catalyst, interesting. So it's like saying that everything that happens to us is actually a lesson in disguise.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's the idea of the veil of forgetting, which is this kind of amnesia that we experience when we incarnate into third density.
The veil of forgetting. What does that do?
Well, it makes us forget our past lives or spiritual origins, basically everything that would give us a direct connection to our true nature.
Why would we want to forget all that?
The idea is that it creates a more level playing field for our spiritual evolution.
Mm.
It allows us to make truly free choices without being biased by past knowledge.
Okay, so it's like a cosmic game where we
Yep.
have to figure things out on our own.
Exactly. And speaking of figuring things out, the Law of One also talks about this idea of a harvest, which is like a graduation point for souls who have achieved a certain level of spiritual development.
Harvest, so like we're all crops being cultivated for something.
Kind of the idea is that when we've learned enough lessons and made enough progress, we can move on to higher densities of existence.
So it's like a promotion to the next grade.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting,
Right.
the Law of One also throws in the concept of Earth being under a kind of quarantine.
A quarantine, like we're all stuck in cosmic lockdown.
Not exactly. The purpose of the quarantine is to protect us from negative influences from other extraterrestrial groups, but it can certainly create a sense of isolation.
So we're being shielded, but also kind of kept in the dark.
That's a good way to look at it. And then there's the whole concept of service to others, or STO, and service to self, or STS, which are like the two main paths we can choose on our spiritual journey.
STO and STS, can you break those down a bit more?
Service to others is all about focusing on love, compassion, unity, and helping others, while service to self is more about pursuing power, control, and self-interest.
So it's like a cosmic battle between good and evil.
Not necessarily evil, but definitely two different orientations that lead to very different outcomes.
Okay, so we've got Catalyst, the Veil of Forgetting, Harvest Quarantine, STO, and STS. Plus, you mentioned extraterrestrial groups like the Confederation and the Orion group.
Right. The Confederation is generally seen as a benevolent group aligned with service to others, while the Orion group is associated with service to self and seeks to manipulate and control.
It's like a cosmic chess match with us humans stuck in the middle.
In a way, and that brings us back to our main question, is Earth a school, a prison, or a test?
Right, because all of these ideas could potentially support any of those perspectives.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to explore today, how these different aspects of the Law of One can help us understand Earth as a school, a prison, or a test.
So let's dive into it, starting with the idea of Earth as a school.
Okay, so the Law of One definitely paints a picture of Earth as a place for learning and growth, almost like a cosmic classroom.
A classroom, what makes it so school-like?
Well, for starters, the Law of One emphasizes that third density is designed for rapid spiritual evolution.
Rapid evolution, why is that?
Because in third density, we develop self-awareness and the ability to make moral choices, which allows us to learn from our experiences in a much deeper way.
So it's like we're finally ready to start taking notes and studying.
Exactly. And then we have the whole concept of catalyst, which we talked about earlier.
Right, Catalyst is the curriculum.
Precisely all those experiences we have, the ups and downs, the challenges, the joys, the relationships, the losses, they're not just random events.
They're all part of the lesson plan.
Exactly. They're opportunities for us to learn and grow, to develop compassion, understanding wisdom, all the things that help us evolve spiritually.
So even those really tough times, those heartbreaking moments, they have a purpose.
That's the idea. They're not meant to punish us or make us suffer, but to teach us something valuable.
It's like the universe is constantly giving us pop quizzes to see if we're paying attention.
Exactly. And here's an interesting thing. The law of one suggests that if we don't learn a particular lesson from a catalyst, it'll keep showing up in our lives in different forms.
Like we're stuck in a loop until we finally get it.
Right. Like the universe is saying, okay, you didn't learn it this way. Let's try again from a different angle.
So it's like we're repeating the same grade until we pass the test.
Exactly. And that brings us to reincarnation.
Right, because if we don't learn our lessons in this lifetime, what happens then?
Well, according to the law of one, reincarnation is like repeating a grade level.
So we get another chance to learn the material.
Right. If we don't achieve a certain level of spiritual graduation, which they call harvest, by the end of a cycle, we continue our learning in another lifetime or even on another planet.
Harvest. That sounds pretty intense, like a final exam for the soul.
It is a significant point of evaluation, and the law of one emphasizes that it's not about passing or failing, but about achieving a certain level of polarization.
Polarization, we talked about that earlier, right?
Yeah.
STO and STS.
Exactly. To graduate to the next level of density, we need to be strongly aligned with either service to others or service to self.
So it's not enough to just be a good person.
Yeah.
You have to be like really committed to either serving others or serving yourself.
That's the idea. And the law of one suggests that most souls end up somewhere in between, not fully polarized one way or the other.
So what happens to them?
They continue to reincarnate until they achieve the necessary level of polarization.
So reincarnation is like a cosmic safety net. It gives us multiple chances to get it right.
Exactly. And within this cosmic school, are there any teachers or guides to help us along the way?
We mentioned wanderers earlier, those advanced souls who come to Earth to help.
Right. Wanderers are like the exchange students who've already completed their third density cycles on other planets, but choose to come back to Earth to assist humanity.
Wow, so they're like spiritual mentors sharing their wisdom and experience.
Exactly. And they can offer valuable insights and guidance to those who are open to receiving it.
So we've got these experienced helpers. But what about more direct guidance, like from a higher power?
The law of one talks about the concept of the higher self, which is a more evolved aspect of our own being.
So it's like a wiser version of ourselves that's always looking out for us.
Exactly. And the higher self can provide guidance through intuition, dreams, synchronicities, even just a quiet inner knowing.
But it doesn't force us to do anything, right?
No, the higher self always respects our free will. It can offer suggestions, but ultimately the choices are ours to make.
So it's like having a spiritual advisor who's always there to give us advice but won't tell us what to do.
Exactly. And the law of one also mentions the Confederation, which we touched on earlier.
Right, those benevolent ETs who are supposedly helping us evolve.
Exactly. They're kind of like the cosmic school board, offering guidance and support from a higher level.
Okay, so to recap the Earth as a school perspective from the Law of One, we're here to learn and grow. We have a curriculum of catalysts to help us learn those lessons, and we have teachers and guides like Wanderers, our higher self, and the Confederation to offer support.
That's a great summary, and it's a pretty optimistic way to look at our time here on Earth.
It is, but let's not forget the other side of the coin, the idea of Earth as a prison.
Right, because despite all the learning and growth opportunities, Earth can certainly feel like a very challenging place at times.
Yeah, it's like sometimes the lessons feel more like punishments, and the school feels more like a prison.
And the law of one does acknowledge that Earth can have certain prison-like qualities.
Okay, so let's explore that perspective. What are some of the reasons why Earth might feel like a prison?
Well, one of the biggest factors is the veil of forgetting, which we talked about earlier.
Right, the cosmic amnesia that makes us forget who we really are.
Exactly. And because of this veil, we can feel isolated and alone, cut off from our spiritual origins and from the vastness of the cosmos.
Like we're trapped in this tiny little bubble of reality.
Precisely. And that sense of separation can be very disorienting and make us feel like prisoners in our own minds.
And then there's the whole cycle of reincarnation, which can also feel kind of prison-like.
Especially if we keep repeating the same mistakes and not making progress.
Yeah, it's like we're stuck in a cosmic hamster wheel, running and running but never getting anywhere.
And some people might look at karma as a form of cosmic punishment, which can also contribute to the feeling of imprisonment.
Right, like we're being held accountable for past actions and there's no escape.
But the law of one doesn't see karma that way. It views it more as a system of energetic balancing.
So it's not about punishment, but about restoring harmony.
Exactly. And reincarnation is seen as an opportunity for us to learn and grow, not as a sentence.
Okay, so it's not a literal prison with bars and guards,
Yeah.
but more like a prison of perception.
Exactly. The bars are created by our own limited awareness, and the feeling of being trapped is often a result of not remembering who we truly are.
And what about the influence of negative extraterrestrial groups, like the Orion group? How do they factor into this prison perspective?
The Law of One describes the Orion group as actively seeking to manipulate and control humanity.
So they're like the cosmic wardens trying to keep us locked up.
In a way, they utilize fear, deception, and control systems to influence our thoughts and actions.
What kind of control systems are we talking about?
Things like authoritarian governments, hierarchical power structures, financial systems, even belief systems that keep us in a state of fear and division.
So they're basically trying to keep us distracted and unaware of our true potential.
Exactly, and that can certainly contribute to the feeling of being imprisoned.
And the Law of One even mentions this idea, a quarantine of Earth.
Right, which, as we mentioned earlier, is meant to protect us from negative influences.
But it can also make us feel isolated and cut off from the rest of the cosmos.
Precisely, it's like being put in protective custody, but also being denied access to the outside world.
So the quarantine is a double-edged sword. It keeps us safe, but also limits our freedom.
That's a good way to put it, and it's another reason why Earth might feel like a prison to some.
Okay, so we've got the veil of forgetting the cycle of reincarnation, the influence of negative ETs, and the quarantine, all contributing to this feeling of imprisonment.
Right, and it's important to remember that these are all just perspectives. Ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide how they view their experience here on Earth.
But even if it's not a literal prison, it can certainly feel like one at times.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to be aware of these influences and to actively choose to break free from those limiting beliefs and perceptions.
And that brings us to our third perspective, Earth as a test.
Right, because if Earth is a school and it can feel like a prison, then it stands to reason that it's also a test of some kind.
A test, what kind of test are we talking about?
The Law of One suggests that third density is specifically designed to be the density of choice.
The density of choice, what does that mean?
It means that every moment of our lives presents us with opportunities to choose how we want to respond, how we want to align ourselves
Excuse me, between what?
between service to others and service to self.
Right, those two fundamental paths we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Every decision we make, every action we take is a reflection of our chosen orientation.
So it's like we're constantly being evaluated on our choices.
In a way, and those choices determine our spiritual progress and ultimately our readiness for harvest.
So it's like a cosmic exam where every question is a choice we have to make.
That's a great analogy, and the Law of One emphasizes that there are no right or wrong answers. It's simply about making the choices that align with our true selves.
So it's not about being judged, but about discovering who we really are.
Exactly, and the challenge we face, the catalyst we encounter, it's all designed to help us make those choices more consciously.
So those tough times, those moments of suffering, they're not punishments, but opportunities for growth.
Precisely, they're designed to push us to our limits and force us to choose who we want to be.
It's like the universe is saying, okay, are you going to choose love or fear, compassion, or judgment, unity, or separation?
And the veil of forgetting plays a crucial role in this test as well,
How so?
because it makes us forget our past lives and our spiritual origins. We have to make these choices without the benefit of hindsight.
So it's like we're starting from scratch each lifetime with no cheat sheet.
Right, and that makes the test much more authentic and meaningful.
Because our choices are truly our own, not based on some predetermined script.
Exactly. And even wanderers, those advanced souls who come to Earth to help, they're also subject to this test.
So they're not immune to the challenges of third density.
No, they choose to incarnate here knowing that they'll face the same veil of forgetting and the same temptations as everyone else.
So it's a real test of their commitment to service to others.
Absolutely. And it shows that even those who are further along on their spiritual journey can still stumble and fall.
So it's a humbling reminder that we're all in this together.
Precisely. And the Law of One also highlights the influence of both positive and negative extraterrestrial groups in this test.
Right, the Confederation and the Orion group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Confederation acts as a kind of guiding force, offering wisdom and support, while the Orion group seeks to manipulate and control.
So like a cosmic battle between good and evil playing out on the stage of Earth.
In a way, but ultimately the outcome of the test is determined by our own choices as individuals and as a collective.
So it's up to us to decide whether we pass or fail.
Exactly. And the law of one emphasizes that failure is not the end. It just means we get another chance to learn and grow.
So it's a test that we can't really lose.
Right. And that's a pretty reassuring thought.
It is, but it also makes you wonder what happens when we do finally pass the test.
Well, according to the law of one, we graduate to fourth density, a higher level of existence where love, compassion, and unity are the dominant forces.
So it's like a promotion to a better school.
In a way, and it's something to strive for, even though the journey can be challenging.
Okay, so we've explored these three perspectives. Earth as a school, Earth as a prison, and Earth as a test.
And we've seen how the law of one offers insights into each of these viewpoints.
So what's the final verdict? Which one is it?
Well, the law of one doesn't really give a definitive answer. It suggests that all three perspectives are valid, depending on your level of awareness and your personal experience.
So it's not an either-or situation, it's more of a both hand.
Exactly. Earth can be a school, a prison, and a test all at the same time.
And how we perceive it depends on our own choices and our own understanding.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that these are just metaphors. They're not meant to be taken literally.
Right. They're just different ways of understanding the complexity of our existence here on Earth.
Exactly. And each perspective can offer valuable insights and help us to navigate the challenges of third density.
So let's break down one last time just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay, sounds good.
From the Earth as a school perspective, what are the key takeaways?
The key takeaways are that we're here to learn and grow, that our experiences are designed to teach us valuable lessons, and that we have teachers and guides to help us along the way.
And what about the Earth as a prison perspective?
Yeah.
What are the main points there?
The main points are that the veil of forgetting can create a sense of isolation and separation, that the cycle of reincarnation can feel like being stuck, and that the influence of negative ETs can make us feel controlled and manipulated.
And finally, the Earth as a test perspective. What are the key insights from that viewpoint?
The key insights are that every moment presents us with a choice between service to others and service to self, that our choices determine our spiritual progress, and that the challenges we face are designed to help us make those choices more consciously.
Okay, so we've got these three perspectives, and we've seen how they can each offer a different understanding of our experience here on Earth.
And it's up to each individual to decide which perspective resonates most with them.
But the law of one reminds us that regardless of how we view Earth, the key to spiritual evolution is to choose love, compassion, and unity.
Exactly, and to remember that we are all connected, we are all part of one original thought.
And that's a beautiful message to end on.
It is, and it's a message that can help us to navigate the challenges of third density with more grace and understanding.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the law of one and the question of whether Earth is a school, a prison, or a test.
My pleasure. It's been a fascinating exploration.
And for you, our listener, we encourage you to continue pondering this question for yourself. What does Earth mean to you? And how can you use these different perspectives to create a more fulfilling and meaningful experience for yourself?
And remember, the journey of spiritual evolution is a marathon, not a sprint.
So be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, and keep choosing love.
And keep learning and growing.
Thank you for listening.